Ladies and gentlemen, welcoming to the Ray Carr Show here in Cleveland, Ohio, Rich Little. Rich, welcome to the show, and thank you for spending some time with us.
Thank you, Ray. Pleasure to talk to you.
Rich, you're one of the greatest impressionists of all time, and there's a new book out called Little by Little, People I've Known and Been. And I was able to peruse the book a little bit, but I'd like to have you talk a little bit more about basic questions of how the career began. I know you grew up in Ottawa, Canada, and
right,
unlikely place for an impressionist and comedian and actor to start from. But let's talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, I was born in Ottawa, which is the capital city, and father was a doctor, mother a housewife, and nobody really in the family that was interested in show business. But I had a great love of movies when I was a kid, and I still do. And I started imitating my teachers, were the first people I imitated. You know, I should have got their signatures down. I would have got better marks, but I decided to do their voices instead, you know.
Was that easy for you to do, or is this something that just kind of slipped out and go, yeah, I'm pretty good at this?
Well, you know, you sit there in class watching the teacher every day, so the first thing I did was their walks and some of their expressions, and so I would get up in front of the class and do the teacher before they arrived in the morning, and go through all his mannerisms, and the kids, of course, were lapping it up, and there was a look at the door, and then they said the teacher's coming, and so I'd take my seat and everybody would behave, and the teacher would walk in and start doing what I had just done and got big laughs, and they couldn't figure out why they were so funny.
Well, you've probably mimicked well over 200 different voices.
Right.
If you had to pick maybe 5, which are your favorites to do?
5 would probably be Ronald Reagan, Jimmy Stewart, Johnny Carson, let me think, maybe Neil Diamond, Tony Bennett. I'm trying to think of some of the better voices. I was known, of course, back in the 70s for doing Nixon, and I
remember that, Rich. I remember.
I still do them occasionally, but but Reagan's always been my favorite of anybody I've ever done.
He had a very unique personality, and he was somebody that I would assume that would be kind of fun to mimic.
Reagan had a great sense of humor. He loved jokes. I used to go to the White House and have a couple of jokes ready to tell him, and he'd write them down. And one time I went to the White House and he started to do impressions for me. Here was Reagan doing his Jimmy Stewart, and he did John Wayne. They were okay, not great. And then he did Truman Capote for me, which blew me away.
Truman Capote?
Yes. Reagan did his Truman Capote for me in the Lincoln Room after some function. And I was amazed at how good it was. But he said to me, Rich, I don't have a joke. I do Truman, but I don't know what to say. And I gave him a joke that I was using in my act. And he wrote it down on the back of a Secret Service man and on a piece of paper. And I told him the joke. And the joke was this. I said, a lot of people think that I wrote in cold blood, but that's not true. Actually, I wrote in ink.
Wow.
So it's kind of a stupid joke, but he loved it. And he wrote it down on the back of the Secret Service man, put the piece of paper in his pocket, and then he said to me, I can't wait to do that for Gorbachev.
Oh, God.
And that really tickled me because I pictured him doing Truman Capote for Gorbachev. Can you imagine?
No, I cannot imagine. I mean, Truman Capote is the last person I would have thought Ronald Reagan would have imitated.
Yeah, well, I mean, he would probably just stand there and why is he talking like this,
Oh, wow. I mean, Richard Nixon, when I grew up, Richard Nixon was, a lot of people did impressions of Nixon. And he was a guy that kind of lent himself to being lampooned.
Yeah, he was a good subject, because he got into a lot of trouble. And, and whenever a politician, when they have problems, actually, it's good for comedians. I mean, Bill Clinton wrote me a lot of great material, and certainly Nixon did.
Yeah.
The Watergate thing was great to satirize.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of fun with Nixon in those days, and I still do them. Richard Nixon. I have a couple of mottos, and one of them is, "Don't put off tomorrow what you can erase today. And if at first you don't succeed, lie again."
Oh my God. That's so good. Wow. And I'm sure a lot of this talent that you did then and still do now probably came from people like Jack Benny, George Burns, and people of that ilk, because I know you spent a lot of time watching those movies as a youngster.
Oh, yeah. I'm a big movie buff, and I still watch a lot of movies. I have a lot of movies. Now put them on digital, but I have about 3,000 DVDs, and that was another reason I started imitating, apart from doing the teachers, was that I was such a movie buff, and I wanted to be these people I saw on the screen, because I admired them so much. I never dreamt that, within 10 or 12 years of being such a fan up in Canada, I would actually meet them and get to know them and work with them. And that's the biggest thrill of my career, was really working with all my idols.
That had to be amazing. To think that you're from Ottawa, Canada, the home of ice hockey, and you go to Los Angeles, and then you're dealing with people like John Wayne, Jack Nicholson, right, Johnny Carson, and the like. And it's like, wow, you pinch yourself and go, I can't believe it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I was doing things with Jimmy Stewart, I remember we did a Julie Andrews show, and I did a sketch with him, and you're trying to be cool and play your part well, but you kept thinking, oh my God, I'm working with Jimmy Stewart. Wow, So you had to pull yourself together,
What?
And Jimmy was a terrific guy. I had a wonderful relationship with him socially, and we did a lot of shows together. And he used to say to me, Rich, too bad you weren't around back in the 40s, and you could have dubbed some of my movies for me, and I could have made a lot more, 'cause you talk a little faster than I do.
Wow, that is tremendous. And there's a whole generation of kids that have never heard of these people.
That's true. I'm working at the Tropicana Hotel 5 nights a week here in Las Vegas. Been there for over a year. And once in a while, a young person will come in and sit down front. And sometimes it throws me, because I'm thinking, they don't know anybody I'm doing. They don't know Dean Martin. They don't know Jack Benny. They don't know George Burns or John Wayne or any of these people, Sinatra. And the other night, there was a 15-year-old sitting right in front of me, and I kept thinking, I don't think he's getting anything. And all of a sudden, the kid starts to laugh, and he's enjoying the show like you wouldn't believe. So when it was over, I went up to him and I said, gee, you shocked me. I mean, you seem to enjoy my show. He said, I did, Mr. Little. You're really funny. I love the show, but I'm confused. And I said, what do you mean you're confused? About what? He said, well, I was just wondering why you kept changing your voice all the time.
Oh, God. That's priceless.
Isn't that great? So obviously he was laughing at the jokes.
Right. He didn't.
Because,
all right. Right.
I said to him, "Did you know anybody that I did?" And he said, "No, not really."
Well, I'm sure he'll Google it. I mean, that's the good thing, and that's what I used to
Well,
do.
I've had people say that to me. Young people have said that to me when I do a show. There was a gal somewhere, and during my show, she was Googling all the people I was imitating and looking, up their life story and who they were and what movies they made while I was doing it. Otherwise, they wouldn't know who it was. I do Clark Gable, and they just Google Clark Gable and say, "Oh, Gone with the Wind," and oh yeah, I think I've seen him. Yeah,
Wow.
So that helps actually.
Yeah. The point of reference is more fresh to them. Yeah. The book, Little by Little, People I've Known and Been. Rich Little, our very special guest here on the Ray Carr Show. Rich, your first TV appearance, and I may be wrong on this, but I think it was the Jimmy Dean Show in New York.
Actually, you're right. Most people say it was the Judy Garland Show, but I've been told by a couple of writers who happened to write the show that I did Jimmy Dean really before I did Judy Garland. Yeah, the Jimmy Dean Show out of New York. And then these writers who were Canadians, they went and worked for Judy Garland. And of course, they knew my work, and they're the ones, plus Mel Torme helped too, who got me on the Garland Show. But you're right, I did do the Jimmy Dean variety show before I did Judy Garland. You're right. You're absolutely right.
Rich, what year was that?
That was probably 1964.
Oh, 64.
Or 63. Yeah.
Okay.
I was just 8 years old. I mean.
Yeah.
Not really.
That was probably slightly after Jimmy had that big hit, Big Bad John.
Yeah, could have been. It's. If you talk about that today, people say, "Oh, Jimmy Dean, the sausage guy," and they don't even remember he had a variety show. But I don't think he had it for long.
No,
I think it folded. I think it was only on for half a season or something. Anyway.
Yeah, he was a good singer, though. I mean, he had his moment in the sun. But the Judy Garland Show was the one most people, I think, remember.
Oh yeah, well, Judy Garland was big time, and that show, I guess, on for 2 or 3 or 4 years.
Yeah,
and that was a terrific show for me because that launched my career actually. Because then after I did Judy Garland, I started to do a lot of variety shows. I mean, gosh, and there were so many back in the 70s.
Oh yeah, but what particular impression or routine did you do that really got you noticed?
Well, on the Garland Show, I did "The Man That Got Away," the song that Judy sang in "A Star Is Born," and I talked it as different voices, and that was the hook I did.
Okay.
And then I finished off with James Mason, which absolutely floored her because she loved James Mason.
I do too. I think he's great.
They made the movie together, "A Star Is Born," and it was the James Mason that really made that spot for me because her reaction was just incredible. So I run into James Mason a couple of months after doing the Garland Show at some function, and I went up to him and I said, "Mr. Mason, my name's Rich Little, and I do an impression of you." And he said, "What's on earth for?" and walked away. I said, "No, you because of you, I got on the Judy Garland Show." "I don't know what you're talking about. Get out of my way."
Oh my God! Wow, that is tremendous.
He was right in character. He wasn't exactly Mr. Jolly.
No,
Mason.
I read something about him. Yeah, he wasn't too approachable, but wow,
but a great actor, and I did a lot of James Mason back then because I was a big fan of his. But it was funny when he said, "What's on earth for?"
That is unbelievable. Oh man. Let's go back and talk about your family a little bit. Your dad was a doctor, and
right.
How did he feel about your career choice?
What?
How did he feel about your career choice?
Well, my dad never really lived long enough to see me do anything other than a few local shows in Ottawa. So I'm sure he thought this was going nowhere. I mean, everybody back then in my family thought it was just a hobby, and that I better start thinking about a career. And so my dad never really saw me do, the Garland Show or Steve Allen or all those variety shows. He never saw any of that. But my mom did. My mom lived till 94, so she saw a lot of things I did.
Well, that's great. That's great. Are there any particular recent actors or people, actors or singers that you would like to do impressions of now that you haven't done yet?
Well, it's a lot tougher now, to do actors particularly because they're not as distinctive as the Gables and the Bogarts and the Ever G. Robinsons and the Cagneys.
That's true.
I mean, how do you imitate George Clooney or
right? That's true.
Or Matt Damon or Brad Pitt? I mean, gosh, I couldn't do Brad Pitt. I'd rather do Angelique Jolie, to tell you the truth. But boy, if I could do her, I'd never be lonely, would I?
No.
I'd probably jump myself. But anyway,
wow.
But my point is that a lot of actors today are good on the screen, but they don't have distinctive voices like the ones in the past.
Yeah, the only people that, if I were an impressionist, which I'm not, I like to see people or hear people do like George Costanza, Jason Alexander. I think from TV people like that, or Seinfeld.
Yeah. I mean, I've got to keep up to date, so I'm
right.
always working on new voices. I was working on Morgan Freeman the other day. Morgan Freeman has that kind of low voice. The Shawshank Redemption. It's a good voice to do because it's so crusty and deep. And then I do Clint Eastwood and Jack Nicholson. Hey, how the hell are you, man? Jack.
Wow.
So you got to do some people that are current, and your act can't be totally deceased.
That's true. That's very true. Rich, back in the day when you were doing the Friars Club and all the stuff like that, did you have any particular moment during that really stands out to you that, looking back on it, it was really magic, but at the time you didn't realize it was magic?
Well, I think the reason that I did so many Dean Martin roasts, I did 24, was the fact that I could imitate a lot of people that were on the dais. And I noticed, looking back, that if there were more than 4 people on the dais that I imitated, I usually got to do the roast. Because my hook was to imitate the people on the dais, and then when I would do them, they would cut to a shot of their reaction,
Yeah.
And people like that. So that's why I did so many roasts. And it was great for me because my material didn't have to be really great because I had the impression, and once you did the impression of somebody, then the audience reacted, and so you didn't have to worry too much about what you were saying. So that was the reason I did so many roasts.
Do you feel more comfortable working with a script, or do you like to work extemporaneously?
Oh no, I usually work off a script. I mean, these people that say they ad lib don't really ad lib. I mean, even Don Rickles, who ad libs a lot, he still knows where he's going. He's still got the routine in his head. And Robin Williams was another one. I mean, he could make up things in a split second, Robin Williams. But he still knew where he was going, and people like that, Jim Carrey, they're pretty good at ad libbing and jumping on the moment, and making something funny out of something in 2 seconds. And those people are rare, but they do exist.
Yeah,
but there's no such thing as somebody just making it up,
Okay, yeah, because I'm not a comedian, so I don't know, and I've heard both sides of that, and I'm glad I got the real story from you. Let me get back to movies, Rich. If you had to pick five of the greatest movies that ever been out for somebody who's never seen a movie from this country, which movies would you pick for them to watch?
Well, I mean, gosh, mostly black and whites, and which a lot of young people don't want to watch.
Oh, I love them.
Oh, I love black and white.
Yeah.
But I ran into a kid who was taking some sort of a movie course at UNLV, and he said, "I've never seen a black and white movie." I said, "Wait a minute. You're taking a course in film and you've never seen a black and white movie?" He said, "No, I don't like black and white movies because they're not real, because life's in color." This is what this kid said to me.
Oh, my God.
And I said, "Life's in color?" He said, "Yeah, that's why I don't like them." I said, "Really? What if you live in Seattle?"
Yeah, good point.
Well, what about at nighttime? Anyway,
yeah.
If I had to pick five movies, I would probably my favorite movie is probably The Best Years of Our Lives.
Okay.
It makes me cry, and it's just a terrific plot and terrific story about the GIs coming home after the war. And I like, of course, It's a Wonderful Life. I like that, and I like Casablanca. Most people do. I remember I went out with a girl once, and she was really pretty, and we got along great. But then she said she hated Casablanca, and I never saw her again. But
wow.
I said, "I've never met anybody who hated Casablanca." Oh, my God. Oh, she said it's corny. I said, "Well, maybe, but it's great." Anyway, let me think of other movies.
How about Citizen Kane?
Well, Citizen Kane is considered by a lot of critics to be the greatest movie of all time. I don't really think so. I think it's unique. Well shot, and it's a good movie, but I don't think it's terribly commercial. But it's a good movie.
Yeah.
I mean, Jimmy Stewart made some great films too. I mean, gosh, Shenandoah is a wonderful film, and Anatomy of a Murder. There's so many great movies.
Well, I agree with you. I agree. A lot of them kind of fall under the radar.
John Ford, John Wayne. I think Red River is terrific.
Yeah.
And The Shootist.
That was his last movie, wasn't it?
Yeah, pretty darn good movie to go out on.
Yeah, I remember that, and it was like 1976, if I'm not mistaken. I was in high school at the time. I remember watching that. It's a good one.
Yeah. Somebody said to me the other day, "Well, Hugh O'Brien was in that. He's the one that shot John Wayne." I said, "No, that's not true. The bartender did."
Wow. Oh, my.
But I'm a big movie buff. I mean, I know a lot about the old movies. I don't know too much about the movies of today. I'm not a big fan of the car chases and all the action stuff that's not real. I don't mind James Bond because we know that's not real. But you watch movies today and you go, "You got to be kidding me!"
Yeah,
this guy would never live with that kind of abuse.
Right. It's a generational thing, I think, Rich, and I think the younger audience, they just like stuff like that. I think whereas the older audience, they want to think they want to be told a good story, and that's what.
Oh yeah. You got to have a good story. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely, got a good story. That makes a good movie. But if you're just having a lot of action and a lot of killing, those kind of films don't really interest me that much. And horror movies don't interest me too much either. You
made a lot of good movies. Was the Marx Brothers?
Well, the Marx Brothers made good movies at the beginning of their career when they did shows they did on Broadway, and they could polish them, and and some of the early ones, but some of the later ones weren't as funny. But you're right, some of the earlier ones were much better. But I was never a huge fan of the Marx Brothers, but I always loved as a kid. I liked Laurel and Hardy.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I love Laurel and Hardy.
Oh, Laurel and Hardy were great. And one time I was at the White House, and I was just invited as a guest, and I was sitting with Reagan, and the president of Sri Lanka was giving a speech. And the president of Sri Lanka said he learned a lot about American culture by watching Laurel and Hardy movies. This is what the president of Sri Lanka said. He learned about American culture by watching Laurel and Hardy movies. And Reagan turned to me and whispered in my ear, he said, "Our kind of guy." So, Reagan loved movies. So then when when the evening was over and we're standing around with the president of Sri Lanka having coffee and just chatting, Reagan says to the president of Sri Lanka, "You know, that was funny. That was quite interesting the way you mentioned Laurel and Hardy, because I was a huge fan of theirs. I saw all their movies too." And he said, "Oh, really?" And he said, "I think my favorite routine they did was Who's on First." And I looked at my wife and went,
"Oh, no.
Don't say anything. He's got the wrong comics. That's Bud Abbott and Lou Costello.
Yeah.
Who's on First, right? Not
Yeah.
Laurel and Hardy."
Right.
But the funny part was when Reagan said to the president of Sri Lanka, "I think my favorite routine Laurel and Hardy did was Who's on First." And the president of Sri Lanka said, "What?" And Reagan said, "What? No, he was on second. Who was on first?"
Oh.
And then the president of Sri Lanka said, I don't understand." He said, "Understand. I think he was in the outfield." They were doing the routine.
Oh, my
And they didn't realize it.
That's classic.
They were doing Who's on First, and they didn't realize it. And I was just biting my lip to keep from laughing. It was hysterical.
Wow.
He had the wrong comics. You know, you remember the routine, Who's on First?
Oh, very well. Yeah. I've heard it a million times.
But if you don't know that routine, this doesn't make any sense to you. But that's what happened. They were doing the routine and they didn't know it.
Wow.
Especially when the president of Sri Lanka said, "What? What? Oh, he was on second. And who's on first?"
Wow. I think Abbott and Costello are the only non-baseball players in the Hall of Fame for that routine.
Really?
Yeah, I was up there a couple of years ago, and I saw they had a big statue of them, and in honor of that incredible routine they did.
Oh, wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, that was the most famous routine I guess they ever did, was Who's on First.
Right. Yeah. It's become.
But I liked about Abbott and Lou Costello, but I liked Laurel and Hardy better. Mind you, a lot of corn, but clever though. Clever corny stuff, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of slapstick, but love the characters. And I did Oliver Hardy once with Julie Andrews, and she played Stan, and I played Oliver Hardy. And that was a very funny sketch we did.
Yeah, I can imagine. Rich, I really want to thank you on behalf of my audience and WCSB Cleveland for your time. Wow, Rich, you are the best, and I mean that sincerely. And I've been a fan for years, and my goodness, thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome, Ray. Thank you.
And you're excellent, and I'll make sure you get a copy of this interview.
Great. Okay.
And the
Super.
best of luck
Good
to you.
talk.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.